Xiaobao Long meets with representatives of the city's finance and business sectors. CLP Group reports a profit of over $6.6 billion last year. And the South Korean government gives striking doctors 4 days to go back to work. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The director of the central government's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office today attended meetings with government officials, financial sector figures, and representatives of local and foreign business chambers. The meetings were part of Xiaobao Long's activities during day 5 of his fact-finding visit to Hong Kong. Mimo Singhai reports.
Director of Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office Xiaobao Long arrived at the central government offices at around 10:30 a.m. He was greeted by senior government officials, including Chief Executive John Lee and Financial Secretary Paul Chan. Xia then waved to the press as he entered the building. This is the 5th day of Xia's fact-finding tour of Hong Kong, and he spent most of the day at the government offices. He first attended a meeting with the officials and representatives of the financial sector, such as Carrie Leung, CEO of the Hong Kong Institute of Bankers. The meeting ended after 90 minutes, and Xia left the building at around 1:30 p.m. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, Christopher Ho, who was also at the meeting, told reporters that the meeting covered 3 areas regarding the city's financial market development. Ho described the meeting with Xia as timely.
Number 1 is about our traditional core areas in terms of bond market, and the other area will be about our connectivity with the mainland. Because today actually marks the first day of the enhanced measures for our Wealth Management Connect. So it's also the time and also timely for us to brief him on the overall arrangements in terms of these latest developments. And the third aspect is regarding the new finance areas like green and sustainability finance, and also at the same time fintech.
At around 2:30 p.m., Xia returned to the government offices for another meeting with over 40 local and foreign business chamber representatives. After the meeting, Chief Executive John Lee stressed the advantages of the SAR.
The study team attaches great importance to the status of Hong Kong as an international city and wants to hear the views of local and foreign chambers. Hong Kong, let me be clear, will continue to serve as an international financial center and global city. We will continue to leverage Hong Kong's one country, two systems framework, enjoying the unwavering support of the motherland while being closely connected to the world at large.
Meanwhile, some foreign business chambers said they support legislation on Article 23 of the Basic Law.
With the rule of law tradition of Hong Kong, I have confidence that it will be handled accordingly.
After his meeting, Xia attended a dinner at Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited. Xia will continue his Day 6 inspection tour in the city on Tuesday. Mimo Singhai, TVB News.
CLP Group experienced major gains last year, reporting a profit of over $6.6 billion. The company predicts there will only be minor changes in international energy prices and believe electricity fees in the SAR will largely stay the same. Timothy Lee tells us more.
CLP Group made an operating profit of over $10 billion last year after discounting fair value. That's a growth rate of 33% year-on-year. The profit figure still reached over $6.6 billion after earnings from the company's Australian clients were deducted. The electricity provider did lower the cost of electricity bills in January this year, with the net rate dropping by 7.4% on a yearly basis. When asked whether it will raise the cost of electricity fees in the future, CLP Group said it will depend on changes in the international energy market. This as the company revealed fuel prices will drop by 45.3 cents next month. CLP Group believes electricity fees in the city will remain largely unchanged, owing to minor fluctuations in international energy prices. CLP Group Executive Director Chang Tong-keung noted price adjustments should be made flexibly according to any change in the international energy market. Chang emphasized the international market will gradually have less effect on the city's electricity prices since the company is transitioning towards the use of low-carbon energy sources. The electricity provider also planned to invest over $52 billion into constructing more electricity facilities across the city, in a bid to satisfy the SCR's growing need for energy and infrastructural development. CLP Group mentioned in its mid-year review last year that it will provide financial assistance to tenants in need if the international energy crisis leads to a surge in fuel prices. The company also agreed to implementing a new penalty system for large-scale power failure incidents. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Sources said the government budget to be announced on Wednesday suggests organizing fireworks or drone performances at Victoria Harbour at least once a month to attract more tourists to the SAR. Some lawmakers believe such events could also be held in other districts of the city to showcase their unique characteristics. Sources said the government will arrange for more food and drinks facilities on the shoreline as part of the measure. This as tourism sector lawmaker Yu Pak Leung stressed hosting such performances in places such as Hong Kong Gold Coast in Tuen Mun will provide a novelty factor. The newest budget will reportedly demand that the Hong Kong Tourism Board come up with a plan to attract tourists to spend more in the city. South Korea's government has given striking young doctors 4 days to report back to work. It said the striking doctors won't be punished if they return by the deadline, but will face indictments and suspensions of medical licenses if they don't. About 9,000 medical interns and residents have stayed off the job since early last week to protest a government plan to increase medical school admissions by about 65%. The walkouts have severely hurt the operations of their hospitals. Government officials said adding more doctors is necessary to deal with South Korea's rapidly aging population. The strikers say universities can't handle so many new students and argue the plan would not resolve a chronic shortage of doctors in some key but low-paying areas such as pediatrics and emergency departments. A public survey shows about 80% of South Koreans back the government plan. Negotiations in the Middle East could see hostages released and an Israeli military offensive in Rafah delayed somewhat if a deal is reached for a weeks-long ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. David Garrett reports.
Israeli military footage of an unspecified assault. It's thought to be the north of Gaza, where residents of Beit Kahia reported tanks and gunmen in running battles with Hamas fighters. Preparations for a ground offensive on the southernmost city of Rafah continue. Israel says troops on the ground in Rafah is crucial in destroying Hamas's capabilities, although a ceasefire will be discussed. Further talks are expected to take place in Qatar and Egypt this week. A third of Hamas-held hostages would reportedly be released in the deal. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told a US network the Rafah assault could be delayed somewhat if a deal is reached for a weeks-long truce. There is widespread concern an attack on heavily populated Rafah could have political fallout. The White House's national security advisor said the warring factions are coming to an understanding. As he told a different American channel, confrontation in Rafah could be avoided.
Has the president seen this plan? Has he been briefed on it?
He has not. And beyond that, Kristen, we have been very clear about our view here. We're talking about more than 1 million people who have been pushed into this small space in Gaza because of military operations elsewhere. It's also the area where all of the humanitarian assistance comes into Gaza to serve all of Gaza. And so we've been clear that we do not believe that an operation, a major military operation, should proceed in Rafah unless there is a clear and executable plan to protect those civilians.
Aid agencies have not been able to get food to northern Gaza since January 23rd. Gazans say they have become reliant on eating weeds. Common mallow with medical properties grows in harsh, dry conditions. These people say it is all they can rely on to keep them going. I wish death because I cannot feed them, yells this man standing with his son. There is no bread, rice, flour, no food. What did we do to deserve this? There is concern that parents like Naeem could move south towards Rafah in search of food. More than 1 million are said to be sheltering in the southern city. Israel says there is a plan to evacuate people from areas of fighting. David Garrett, TVB News.
A serving member of the U.S. Air Force set himself ablaze outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., in an apparent protest against Israel's war in Gaza. The serviceman streamed it live, saying he will no longer be complicit in genocide. Police believe the unarmed man, in a critical condition in hospital, started a live stream, doused himself, and ignited. The Metropolitan Police Department in Washington said it had responded to the scene and is assisting the Secret Service. A bomb squad was called to examine a suspicious vehicle. There was a similar protest when another man set himself on fire outside the Israeli consulate in Atlanta in December. Trade ministers from nearly every country in the world have gathered in Abu Dhabi as the World Trade Organization's 13th WTO Ministerial Conference gets underway today. The three-day meeting aims to set new global commerce rules, but the head of the body sought to curb expectations ahead of the summit. Daniel Rao reports.
In her opening address, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the head of the World Trade Organization, described the atmosphere as tougher than the WTO's 2022 meeting, citing wars, tensions and elections, and signs that trade growth will undershoot the body's own estimate. She called on ministers to roll up their sleeves and complete negotiations, but seemed to rule out any deal in Abu Dhabi on reforming the body's appeals court.
Let's not pretend that any of this will be easy. If we thought the world looked tough in mid-2022, when we were slowly emerging from the pandemic and the war in Ukraine had shaken food and energy security, we are in an even tougher place today.
However, negotiators say they're still hopeful for an agreement that could buoy global fish stocks and protect fishermen by banning government subsidies. Other outcomes from the four-day meeting that are either definite or achievable are the accession of two new members, the Comoros and East Timor. That's in addition to a deal among some 120 countries to remove development hampering investment barriers. Tougher areas are extending a 25-year moratorium on applying tariffs on digital trade, which South Africa and India oppose, and an agreement on agriculture trade rules that has eluded negotiators for decades. Ahead of the conference, China hit back at a report by the Office of the United States Trade Representative that claimed China's economic system and policies pose huge challenges for global trade. China's Commerce Minister said Beijing has always supported more developing countries in integrating into the multilateral trading system. He also said China will make more efforts to improve the openness, inclusiveness and balance of the world trade system and has earnestly fulfilled its WTO commitments. Dan Rowell, TVB News.
Still ahead, Ukraine's president stresses the need for aid from allies in its war against Russia. Belarusian President Lukashenko says he'll run for the top office again in 2025. And a man plunges to his death in North Point, piercing through the roof of a bus. Welcome back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country urgently needs artillery and air defenses from its allies to continue defending itself from Russia. In an interview with NBC News, he also rejected the idea that the war had reached a stalemate 2 years on from Russia's invasion.
As Ukraine commemorates 2 years since Vladimir Putin invaded, President Zelensky told reporters tonight delays of weapons and ammunition from allies, including the United States, are costing Ukrainian lives, saying 31,000 of his troops have been killed so far in the war, his first update of the death toll in a year. President Zelensky said Russian troops are taking advantage of Ukraine's lack of supplies with a new offensive, which he expects will intensify over the next 2 months. I met up with the president in our fifth conversation since the war began. The president began by saying Ukraine has no choice but to keep fighting because the cost of losing to President Putin is everything.
If he will break defending lines, he will destroy all the cities. He doesn't need anything, any Ukrainian culture. He will destroy it. Architecture, museums, schools, universities, people.
Mr. President, I just returned from several areas along the front line in the south and in the east, and soldiers there told me they have to ration their ammunition. What happens to your country if this American aid doesn't arrive?
We will lose a lot of people. We will lose territories. If to give us strong package in one time, our steps will be more strong on the battlefield.
Do you think the United States wants Ukraine to win this war? Or do they just want you to weaken Russia and contain Russia?
I hope so. I hope so. Otherwise, how to trust people? You know, it's so difficult to live without any trust. So I mean, we count on our partners.
You said that you believe this year is a turning point year for Ukraine because of, in part, U.S. elections. You pointed specifically to the U.S. elections. Are you talking about Donald Trump? Are you worried that Donald Trump could pull the plug?
I hope he will not stop. If he will be the president, that is the decision of your people, of course. And I hope that the policy of the country will not change. I count on the American people.
President Zelensky also outlined a peace plan to end the war, with Ukraine presenting its terms to Russia this spring, followed by direct talks. The Kremlin has already rejected the proposal.
Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko said he would run for president again in 2025. That's according to Belarusian state media. Lukashenko is one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's closest allies and allowed the Kremlin to use his country's territory to launch its invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Lukashenko's re-election to a sixth term in 2020 sparked protests alleging mass vote rigging. Putin offered support to Lukashenko, and the demonstrations died out after mass detentions. Lukashenko made his comments after voting in parliamentary and local council elections denounced by the U.S. as a sham. Belarus is set to form a new state body, the 1,200-seat All-Belarus Popular Assembly. It will include top officials, local legislators, union members, and pro-government activists. The assembly will have broad powers, including the authority to consider constitutional amendments and to appoint election officials and judges. The Court of Final Appeal has granted permission to the government to appeal against earlier court rulings on extending public housing inheritance rights for same-sex couples. The city's top court said the government's justifications involve a topic that remains largely controversial in the SAR and that there should be space for further discussions. Timothy Lee reports.
Over the past year, the High Court handled 3 cases involving same-sex couples' public housing rights. They include such couples being unable to apply for public housing under the identity of a normal family, and same-sex partners being excluded from inheritance or be listed as a family member in such property. Judicial authorities found such policies to be discriminatory and run contrary to the Constitution, and ruled against the government in all the cases. Earlier government appeals have also been rejected. The Housing Authority and Department of Justice submitted another application for appeal to the Court of Final Appeal and mentioned 6 disputes. They included whether normal families consisting of heterosexual couples have a unique right to applying for public housing, as well as same-sex couples' inability to have children not being in accordance with a public housing scheme that offers more units to incentivize births. Regarding inheritance rights, the DOJ stressed marriage and inheritance laws are directly linked, and noted the issue of same-sex marriage is still under government review. This as the Court of Final Appeal noted it granted the government permission to appeal after considering the case's impact on current policies and impact on the public. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Today marks the 32nd day of former media tycoon Jimmy Lai's national security trial. This as former Apple Daily associate publisher Chan Pui-man continued her testimony as an accomplice witness. She told the court that Lai had not thought about changing the newspapers and news angles after his arrest. The prosecution displayed an Apple Daily article published in August 2020 mentioning that Lai, after he was granted bail, told his staff that everything will continue and Apple Daily will survive. Chan said she was there when Lai made the statements. The former associate publisher noted that in the following few months, Lai never mentioned any need for Apple Daily to change its reporting angle. A man died after falling from a height and crashing through the roof of a double-decker bus in North Point. No passengers were injured. Police boarded the upper deck of the bus to investigate and take photos of the scene. The incident took place at 4 p.m. The bus was on Route 99 heading towards Shao Kei Wan. The man was sent to hospital and later pronounced dead. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Pearl Magazine is up shortly. Bye for now.